Today's lecture will cover two pivotal events in American history, the War of 1812 and the Market Revolution. Both of these events had far-reaching effects on the development of the United States in the early 19th century. The War of 1812 is often overshadowed by the American Revolution and the Civil War, but it was an essential conflict that solidified American independence and shaped the nation's relationship with foreign powers, particularly Britain. Meanwhile, the Market Revolution fundamentally transformed the US economy, society, and workforce. It marked a shift from a subsistence-based agrarian economy to one increasingly driven by market forces, industrialization, and capitalist growth. By exploring both events in detail, we can better understand how they interacted to shape the country's political, economic, and social landscape. Let's begin with the War of 1812. The War of 1812, which lasted from June 18, 1812 to February 17, 1815, was fought between the United States and Great Britain. Often referred to as America's Second War for Independence, it stemmed from multiple issues, including British interference in American trade, the impressment of American sailors, territorial disputes, and rising tensions between the US and Native American tribes allied with the British. The roots of the War of 1812 lay in the ongoing Napoleonic Wars between Britain and France, which had been raging since 1803. Both nations sought to undermine each other's economies by restricting trade with neutral countries, including the United States. The British, with their dominant navy, implemented a series of trade restrictions that severely disrupted American commerce. Under the Orders in Council, Britain required that neutral ships, such as American vessels, stop at British ports and pay duties before trading with European nations, particularly France. This not only hindered American merchants who relied on international trade, but also angered political leaders who saw these restrictions as violations of American sovereignty. The embargoes caused widespread economic difficulties in the United States, particularly in the New England states, where commerce and shipping were vital industries. Many American traders, shipbuilders, and port cities found their livelihoods threatened by these restrictions, creating strong resentment toward Britain. Another critical issue that fueled the desire for war was the British practice of impressment. The Royal Navy, which was chronically short of sailors due to the demands of the Napoleonic Wars, forcibly recruited men from American merchant ships by claiming that they were deserters from British Navy. Between 1803 and 1812, thousands of American sailors were captured and impressed into British service. This practice not only violated American sovereignty but also sparked outrage among the American public. The impressment of American sailors became a symbol of British arrogance and disregard for American independence. It galvanized support for the war, as many Americans believed that their nation's honor was at stake. For President James Madison and members of Congress, impressment was a direct challenge to American sovereignty and an affront to the nation's emerging identity as a free and independent country. In addition to these grievances, a group of young and aggressive congressmen known as the War Hawks played a significant role in pushing the United States toward war. Led by figures like Henry Clay of Kentucky, the War Hawks advocated for military action as a way to defend American honor and expand US territory. The War Hawks believed that Britain's involvement in the Napoleonic Wars presented a unique opportunity for the United States to assert its power and seize control of Canada, which was then a British colony. They argued that conquering Canada would not only remove the threat of British interference in North America, but also provide the United States with valuable new territory for settlement and economic development. For the war hawks, the conflict with Britain was not just about defending American rights. It was also about fulfilling the nation's manifest destiny by expanding its borders and asserting its dominance on the North American continent. On June 18, 1812, after years of escalating tensions, President James Madison signed a declaration of war against Great Britain. However, the United States was ill-prepared for the conflict. The US military was small, underfunded, and poorly organized, with the bulk of its forces made up of state militias. The US Navy, though capable, was vastly outnumbered by the powerful British Royal Navy, which was one of the most formidable naval forces in the world. Additionally, the country was divided over the decision to go to war. While the war hawks and many in the South and West supported the conflict, opposition to the war was strong in New England, where many merchants and ship owners relied on trade with Britain. The war was also seen as an unnecessary risk by Federalists, who feared that it would lead to economic ruin and further weaken the country. A major goal of the war hawks was to invade and annex Canada, which they believed would be an easy target given Britain's preoccupation with the war against Napoleon in Europe. However, early American attempts to invade Canada ended in disaster. In 1812, General William Hull led an invasion of Upper Canada from Detroit, but his forces were poorly equipped and demoralized. Hull's campaign quickly collapsed, and he ultimately surrendered Detroit to British. This was a humiliating defeat for the US and a major victory for the British and their native allies. In 1813, the US launched several more attempts to invade Canada, but these efforts also failed. The lack of coordination, poor leadership, and logistical difficulties all contributed to the failure of these campaigns. The US military was simply not prepared for a large-scale war against a well-trained and experienced British force, particularly one that had the support of Native American warriors. While the US struggled on land, it enjoyed some early successes at sea. The US Navy was much smaller than the British Royal Navy, but it had several well-built ships and experienced sailors. One of the most famous ships of the war was the USS Constitution, nicknamed Old Ironsides, for its ability to withstand British cannon fire. In 1812, the Constitution won a series of victories against British warships, boosting American morale and proving that the US Navy could hold its own against the British. However, these early naval victories were short-lived. By 1813, the British had established a blockade of the American coastline, which severely hampered American trade and the war effort. The blockade was particularly effective in New England, where many port cities relied on trade for their economic survival. The British Navy's control of the sea also made it difficult for the US to launch further invasions of Canada or to move troops and supplies along the coast. The war officially ended with the signing of the Treaty of Kent on December 24, 1814. The treaty restored the pre-war status quo, meaning that no territory changed hands, and the issues that had caused the war, such as impressment and trade restrictions, were largely left unresolved. However, these issues became irrelevant after the defeat of Napoleon and the resumption of normal trade relations between Britain and the United States. Although the war ended in a stalemate, it fostered a sense of national unity and pride in the United States. The successful defense of Baltimore and the victory at New Orleans gave Americans a sense of having triumphed over a powerful adversary, and the war became known as a Second War for independence. The war also helped to cement the US's identity as a nation separate from European conflicts and influences. The aftermath of the War of 1812 had devastating consequences for Native American tribes, particularly those who had allied with the British. This opened the door for an accelerated westward expansion by American settlers who flooded into territories that had previously been held by native peoples. The US government increasingly adopted policies that favored settlement and displacement of native populations, often through treaties that were not honored. The weakening of Native American resistance during and after the war set the stage for future conflicts and further encroachment on indigenous lands. This period also marked the beginning of a more aggressive US policy of westward expansion, as the idea of manifest destiny began to take root in American political and cultural thought. The political landscape in the United States also underwent significant changes as a result of the War of 1812. The Federalist Party opposed the war, and hence the perception of the Federalists as unpatriotic and overly sympathetic to Britain led to their decline and eventual dissolution as a national political party. The war thus allowed the Democratic Republicans to emerge as the dominant political force, leading to a more unified national identity. Under the leadership of President James Monroe, the nation entered a period known as the Era of Good Feelings, during which political strife diminished significantly, and there was a growing sense of national purpose and unity. Economically, the War of 1812 had lasting effects on the United States. The British blockade of American ports during the conflict forced the nation to become more self-sufficient and spurred domestic manufacturing. As British goods were cut off, American industries began to grow, laying the foundation for the country's industrial revolution. The war prompted Congress to pass protective tariffs such as Tariff of 1816, aimed at shielding emerging American industries from foreign competition. This marked a significant shift in US economic policy, reflecting a newfound commitment to fostering domestic production and industry. Now that we have explored the War of 1812 in detail, let's transition to discussing the Market Revolution, a period of profound economic transformation that took place in the United States from the early 19th century to the 1850s. The Market Revolution marked a significant shift in the American economy, moving from a system based primarily on agricultural and subsistence farming to one driven by industrial production, technological innovation, and market-based transactions. The Market Revolution was characterized by significant changes in production, transportation, communication, and labor systems. These changes would redefine how Americans interacted with the economy and each other, setting the stage for significant social, political, and cultural transformations. The Market Revolution was propelled by technological advancements that revolutionized both agriculture and industry. The rise of factories brought about a new system of production. In the textile industry, innovations such as spinning jenny and power loom dramatically increased output. These machines allowed for the mass production of cloth, paving the way for the United States to become a major player in textile manufacturing. In agriculture, technological innovations transformed farming practices. John Deere's steel plow allowed farmers to cultivate land that had previously been difficult to farm, while Cyrus McCormick's mechanical reaper greatly increased the efficiency of harvesting grain. These innovations allowed farmers to increase their productivity, which in turn facilitated greater production for market sale rather than just for subsistence. The transportation revolution was essential for integrating the national economy. Improved transportation made it easier and cheaper to move goods, expanding markets and facilitating economic growth. The establishment of turnpikes or toll roads connected cities with surrounding rural areas, improving the movement of goods and people. These roads were often privately financed and built to withstand heavy traffic, enhancing connectivity across regions. The construction of canals became a major focus during this period, as they provided an efficient means for transporting goods. The Erie Canal, completed in 1825, is one of the most notable examples. This 364-mile waterway connected the Great Lakes with the Atlantic Ocean via the Hudson River, significantly reducing transportation costs and time. The success of the Erie Canal prompted a wave of canal construction throughout the country, further facilitating commerce and trade. The advent of steamboats in the early 19th century transformed river travel, allowing vessels to move upstream against the current, thus expanding trade routes along major rivers like the Mississippi and Ohio. In the 1830s, railroads began to emerge as a powerful mode of transportation. The first significant railroad, the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad, began operation in 1830. By 1860, the US had over 30,000 miles of railroad track, facilitating rapid transportation of goods and people and connecting remote areas to urban markets. The communication landscape also changed dramatically during the market revolution. Advances in technology allowed for the rapid dissemination of information across the nation. Invented by Samuel Morse, the telegraph revolutionized communication by enabling instant messaging over long distances. This technology became crucial for businesses as it allowed for quick updates on market conditions, commodity prices, and important news. By the late 1840s, the telegraph network spanned the nation, linking cities and improving coordination in commerce. The market revolution marked a decisive shift from a subsistence economy where families produced most of what they needed for their own use to a market economy focused on producing goods for sale. As technological innovations improved productivity, farmers began specializing in cash crops for distant markets, leading to greater economic independence across regions. For instance, farmers in the Midwest began producing wheat and corn, while southern states became increasingly focused on cotton production. This shift allowed for the rise of a national market where goods were traded across state lines and between regions, fostering economic growth and opportunity. As the market economy expanded, it led to significant urbanization. Cities grew rapidly as people moved from rural areas to urban centers in search of work in factories. This shift resulted in the development of an industrial workforce composed of men, women, and children who often worked long hours under difficult conditions. The textile mills, particularly in New England, employed many young women known as mill girls. They lived in company boarding houses and worked under strict rules, but the wages they earned allowed them to contribute to their families and gain some degree of independence. While the working conditions were often harsh, with long hours and low pay, the opportunity for women to work in factories represented a shift in traditional gender roles. The market revolution also marked the expansion of capitalism as the dominant economic system in the United States. Business owners began to invest heavily in new technologies, industries, and infrastructure. They sought to maximize profits by adopting more efficient production methods and exploring new markets. This capitalist economy was characterized by the emergence of corporations which allowed for the pooling of resources and investments in large-scale projects such as railroads and factories. The expansion of capital markets and the growing availability of credit facilitated this process, leading to rapid economic growth. While the market revolution brought prosperity to some, it also exacerbated class divisions and economic inequality. The gap between wealthy capitalists and poor wage laborers widened as industrialization took hold. The concentration of wealth in the hands of a few led to social tensions and challenges for the working class, who faced long hours, low wages, and often unsafe working conditions. The rise of a distinct working class, composed of factory workers and laborers, marked a new chapter in American social dynamics. Many workers began organizing for better conditions and wages, laying the groundwork for the labor movement that would gain momentum in the later part of the 19th century. While the market revolution sparked significant economic growth, it also introduced new forms of economic insecurity. The economy became increasingly volatile due to the dependence on national and international markets. Economic downturns, known as panics, became a regular feature of American economic life. The Panic of 1819, for instance, was characterized by overspeculation, resulting in bank failures, widespread unemployment, and a loss of confidence in the economy. These panics led to a significant financial instability, with banks suspending payments and people losing their savings. The interconnectedness of the economy meant that problems in one sector could quickly spread, resulting in widespread economic distress. The market revolution had profound implications for the institution of slavery in the United States. As demand for cotton skyrocketed due to the needs for northern textile mills and international markets, the southern states expanded their reliance on enslaved labor. Cotton became the dominant cash crop in the South, and the increase in plantation agriculture led to a surge in the demand of enslaved individuals. The rise of cotton economy entrenched the institution of slavery in the South, creating a dichotomy between the industrializing North and the agrarian South. This growing sectional divide would ultimately contribute to the tensions that led to the Civil War.